Welcome to the Women Leaders Association Daily Member Podcast, where we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. I'm your host, Julianne Kirkland. And in each Daily Member Podcast, we will pick out a great speaker from one of our meetings that we thought you would enjoy. You can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. If you would like to get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or find a networking group near you, or if you just need access to the membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Now let's tune in for this incredible message.
Yeah, so my name is Amanda Devito. I am beyond honored to be here. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Butler Till and our sister agency, Digital Hive. And again, just really grateful to be here and talking to you about all sorts of fun topics today. So we're going to take a bunch of different paths, from leadership to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, to flexibility, to why as leaders we struggle with change. And there's going to be a weaving in some psychological things that I've navigated, mental health, all sorts of great topics. So I hope you really enjoy today. Okay, so we are a little bit about Butler Till and Digital Hive. We're a woman-owned, employee-owned, and a B Corp marketing agency. So there's very few, if not any, that can say those things. And we are really honored to be them. We serve a wide variety of industries such as healthcare, insurance, financial, automotive, higher ed, many others. But when it comes to my primary role and vision for my department, it's really to position Butler Till and Digital Hive as really the destination for top talent, clients, and partners. No pressure, right? And when I think about that, it makes me realize why leadership is so incredibly important. If we don't have phenomenal culture and great leaders within our building, we will not be ultimately the top destination for clients, partners, and talent, which is something that is, I think, weighing on everybody. So that is why this topic is so incredibly important to me. And by no means am I any sort of an expert. What you're going to hear in the next hour is just some of my opinion, and with some experts sprinkled in and some data points that are far more well-versed in this arena than I. But I will be sharing some of my experiences because I've been on this leadership journey for roughly 20 years. And in that journey, I have come to realize that at the end of the day, it's always been that my number one product has been people. And we're still so profoundly impacted for the past few years because business priorities have changed. Adapting to whatever the new normal is has been a challenge. The return to work is still one of the biggest areas of debate, and the hottest topic still is labor in a tight market, or the ability that the world just opened up because of things like Zoom. So you don't have to necessarily only be able to work in your community. That's a bunch of game-changing things. And the workforce has been asking for flexibility and different ways of working for years upon years upon years. But the pandemic really forced the situation and created all of us, including myself, to question, were those millennials right all along? Now, I am not a millennial, but I'm on the cusp, and I'm clearly not a Gen Z, but I'm telling you, millennial-wise, Gen Z, whatever generation, what I've found is there is so much similarity between all of them, more so than differences at times. And one of the things that I love, especially being in an agency with such young talent, is what they're asking of us and what they're asking for. And so we have not only a bunch of generations, but we have a new generation coming up that is asking for the same type of things that we've heard in the last couple of years, but they're doing it with an increased vigor. Loving demand, I like to say. This macro event just taught us that in a constrained environment, innovation in the way that we've worked, in the way that we've thought about work, has flourished. So let's talk about why are we still so incredibly hesitant? Because I still hear it from my peers, from colleagues. It's just still this massive hesitation. So there was a time when talking about flexibility and new ways of working was not the norm. It stood out as being a very bizarre, strange set of ideas. and frankly, way too different. So let's step back a bit and let's think through kind of the psychology. Why do we just struggle with change as humans? And a big reason is because it brings up usually more questions than answers. And that usually makes a lot of people very uncomfortable. And many times change is hard. I think as leaders, we like to say we love change, but I think it's a lot harder than we recognize. And so if we kind of dive into why we resist change, I think it helps us become more self-aware as to how to mitigate that and how to look at it from a new lens. So loss of control, right? We don't like that feeling. Very few of us. First of all, you're bringing your whole self to work. At times, that's trauma. That's baggage. That's difficult dealings with managers, right? So when you have that, sometimes controlling things makes you feel better. So a loss of control is something that is usually very uncomfortable for people. Past bias. What has influenced us to avoid change? Where have we tried to maybe present change and we had managers shut it down? And so what does that do? It sort of trains you to go, okay, well, I'm not going to do that anymore. I'm not going to raise my hand and ask for change. Excess uncertainty. Again, unknowns. Unknowns can be very scary and confusing to people. I always like to think there's great surprises in business, but guess what? Many times there's scary ones. In my world, it's like client loss or even worse, things that are happening to our people. Those things are scary. And then everything sometimes just seems different, right? I knew these things and now I don't. Raging self-doubt can creep in. And I don't care how long you've been in business. Everybody has imposter syndrome. Everybody has raging self-doubt. And great leaders admit it. I absolutely have both of those things at any given time. And I think that right there is like when that kind of self-doubt creeps in, what happens is you get this sort of loss of face with self-doubt. And when you lose face, you can come across as not being an expert. It leads to concerns over competence. And though we hear words like balance and integration, what if it actually creates more work? What if there's ripple effects? What if past resentments rear their head? So all of this, when you really kind of go through this list, you realize like, okay, I kind of get why we resist change. And it can be a challenge. So now let's talk about why bosses, leaders, whatever you want to say, tend to be really inflexible about flexibility and flexible work arrangements and why they so innately want to return to what they consider normal. So I don't know if any of you have experienced this, and I've heard us at times say this, like, oh, I can't wait to return to normal. And I kind of think like, I don't know if that's ever really going to be the case, or there's a new normal. And are we okay with accepting that new normal? So there was a pulse survey done, roughly 10,000 workers across 6 countries, and executives are twice as likely to want to go back to the office full time. But staff, or in this particular survey, they identified as non-executive knowledge workers, don't agree. And more than 3/4 of them, about 76%, said that they want flexibility in whether they work from home or the office. And even more so, 93% want flexibility of when they work, right? So the constructs of Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, whatever those are, all being questioned and judged. So the data is out there. It speaks for itself. But yet we are still struggling as bosses and leaders to hear that and then actually address it or think differently around it. So why the disconnect? Well, I'm very fortunate. When the pandemic happened, we are in a house that within practically weeks, we converted a bedroom to an office, right? We don't have kids, but I saw a lot of our neighbors have the resources and ability to immediately get instant childcare. So many times when you are at a level in your career, you might have a better house, better offices, better pay, better resources all around. Let's talk about privilege. You might have so many opportunities that other people don't have, and affording childcare when schools close. We can shut doors. I have an office. So sometimes I always say, God, I love being out of my office. And there's a lot of people that look at me like, I'd love to be in your office. So just being aware of that and recognizing that amongst all of this, we sometimes as executives and leaders, we kind of think of ourselves as a focus group of one. And that is something that I'm acutely aware of as I'm kind of navigating this and continuing to navigate this, to recognize, wait, am I really talking about myself? Who is not being represented in the room right now that we have to lend a voice to? And let's be honest, we struggle as leaders when it comes to not knowing all the things, right? They're looking to us. They're looking for guidance. But I've recognized it's okay to go, I don't know. Like, this is where we're at. This is the challenge that we're having, and just being really vulnerable and transparent in that dynamic. And again, research, Brene Brown, anything about sharing that transparency, sharing that vulnerability, it really actually will draw your people more so. Okay, so the reality is there's just a big disconnect there. And it leaves us with massive recruitment retention issues. We saw 4 million-ish Americans quit their jobs in April 2021 alone. I believe that was about a 20-year high. And then on top of all of this is the fact that we all need to be more diverse. And flexibility helps with diversity. So the data has shown that Asian and Black respondents in this particular survey, 87%, 81% favor flexibility and flexible working. And then regarding gender, 85% of women favor it as well. If we embrace flexibility, not only will we attract talent, but we will attract diverse talent. And let's shift, because I think there's a really important thing to talk about diversity. And in case any of you have been living under a rock, which I know you have not, diversity is the key to any company's success. It just is. And data point upon research has proven that. So let's kind of break down what that all looks like. And we're going to look at it in the D, the E, the I, and the B. So diversity, obviously, representation or composition of social identity groups, race, ethnicity, gender identity, sexual orientation, geography, age, language, disability, mental well-being status, socioeconomic status, religion, a multitude of other dimensions. And then equity is really that sense of fairness and justice that acknowledges the impartial distribution of resources according to need, and it seeks to ensure that these needs are essentially met. Inclusion, cultivating an environment of belonging by acknowledging and welcoming and accepting different approaches, styles, perspectives, and experiences. That's the big word, accepting of those things. And then lastly, belonging, that's that feeling of really being psychologically safe, feeling accepted, feeling deeply welcomed, for all aspects of your identity, all aspects, right? Your hairstyle, your tattoo, right? This is the way that is the world is shifting. And I got to tell you, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love embracing it. I really am letting go of some old constructs and mindset that I'm having. And the more I embrace it, the more I am just incredibly pleasantly surprised. So the part of like belonging in the context of the workplace is it's this notion of feeling seen. So you're being seen for your unique contributions. You're feeling seen for being connected to coworkers. You're supported in your daily work and your career development, and so proud of your organization's purpose and values. And that's really what it comes down to. And so specifically, because I really think that we've segmented D and E and I and B. So D and E to me are really under kind of the HR lens of policies and procedures. But when it comes to the I and the B, that is something that I feel deeply responsible as a leader within our organization to double down on and make sure that we hone in on that. So for this particular session, I do want to hone in on the particular I and the B. So one thing I kind of like, and I can't remember where I stole this from. I steal great things from great people, way smarter than me. But this one always sort of resonated with me, which is diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion means being asked to dance, but belonging is really being asked for the input and the playlist for the dance music and feeling free to ask anyone you want to dance with you. And when you think about it in that lens, and though it's a very simple analogy, you can say, hey, yeah, come on, come to the dance, come to this meeting. and they come to the meeting, but they don't feel like they can be involved or empowered or that they can share their voice. That is that kind of level up of belonging. And that's why we've added the B. So a lot of times you'll hear DEI, and I think it's really important to change our vernacular to DEIB, because the belonging piece is just absolutely, absolutely crucial. Diversity is really that numbers game. Equity is about fairness and policies, procedures, promotions. But inclusion and belonging are the things that can really, really, really drive impact. Companies can mandate diversity and ensure equity, but they must cultivate that inclusion and belonging. All aspects of DEIB are crucial, all of them, for sure. And in a talent crisis and companies that are trying to be innovative, which is another buzzword you hear, is like, how do we be innovative? How do we be innovative? Well, we just came out of a couple of years of a massive constraint, and the companies that have really stepped up are the ones that were innovative. And so I think, innovation is woven through every part of our company. It should be woven through every part of yours. And the reality is, to be innovative, you need to have diversity and engaged workforce. You need those two things to be really a long sustaining growth engine. It's just the data continues to prove that out. And companies reap substantial bottom line benefits. So God forbid you're in a situation where, your leaders or your managers don't get it. It's baffling to me, because if they don't believe in it because it's just the right thing to do, there are literal bottom line benefits. There are financial benefits. I never like to think that, it's a bottom line thinking. Bottom line should be the outcome of a smart strategy, of smart diversity, of smart engagement. That should be the outcome. But that is not always the case. And I don't like to assume that everybody is kind of living in that environment. But high belonging was really linked to around 56% increase in job performance, 50% drop in turnover risk, and 75% reduction in sick days. So again, those are hard data points to kind of argue against. If you don't have an engaged and diverse workforce, you are in trouble. And maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but you should be concerned and think about it. How are you going to sustain your organization? How are you going to think about leadership in the future if you don't have those things? And here's really why. So research shows ethnically diverse companies perform 33% better than the norm. Forbes' best top workplaces for diversity enjoy 24% higher revenue growth. Diverse teams, 87% better at making decisions. I love this. By 2025, 75% of the workforce will be made up of millennials. So guess what? If you're not listening to them now, if you're not listening to Gen Z now, it's going to be a challenge in the future, right? And they really believe their organization to be more innovative is to have a culture of diversity. These are the things that are asking about. We have some really great young talent that are asking things like, what is your DEIB strategy? What is your thoughts around mental health? And I love that they're asking that in the interview process. And I wish I could tell my younger self, hey, ask this, ask them about culture, ask them to define culture, ask them to define the difference between culture and perks and benefits. I mean, imagine if we all could have told our younger selves to kind of challenge that. And I think that's so incredible. So net, diversity and engagement are simply good for business. It's the right thing to do, right? So it's good for business, but it is the right thing to do. Diversity is the key to innovation. It is the key to growth. It's the key to being and continuing to be relevant in our century and beyond. And engagement comes quite close to that. So knowing all of this, I think the challenge, and I mentioned this earlier, is that it does bring up more questions at times than answers. So let's go through some of the questions, one that we've kind of asked ourselves, that I've asked myself, that just kind of keep popping up. What will recruitment look like? Different. I don't mean to oversimplify it, right? It's going to be different. That's okay. For one, you're going to see different titles at companies, titles that realize the difference between strategy around talent and hiring. You look at any HR professional, I don't think too many of them signed up or even thought that they were going to sign up to being having to navigate just mental health, having to navigate burnout and anxiety and depression, and having those conversations at work, right? So you're going to see different titles. You're going to see probably divergence between just HR and more of that kind of psychological aspects of HR. You'll see more automation. You're going to see probably far more strategic planning and much better integration with company-wide initiatives. So for example, a few years ago, I never worked with HR as a function. I mean, maybe it was just based on our size, but now, even though marketing, it was always kind of from an external lens. Now with our marketing efforts, they are deeply tied to my colleagues' HR efforts and talent efforts. And we don't stop there. We are really doubling down on marketing internally to our employees. What is their experience like, both remote and on site, which I'll touch on in a bit. We even leverage our space as a channel. So we have all these kind of TVs set up within the building. And so we're highlighting different experiences. We're highlighting events, when they can get involved during the month, which ones are remote events, which ones are on site, which company is it matching to. Things like Grilled Cheese Day, which we do have Grilled Cheese Day, to a PhD coming in, talking to us about the intersection of diversity and mental health and all the social identities that you bring into your work. Talk about like Grilled Cheese Day to a PhD talking about that. And I love it. And so it's gonna look different, but it's okay that it's gonna look different. Now, what does real empowerment look like? We talk about empowerment, we talk about engagement. Real empowerment looks real. It looks real. You can feel it. You can see it. You see decisions are being made. You see autonomy in that decision process. You see, though there's titles and hierarchy, you see and feel like I can share that with the CEO or the C-suite. I can have those conversations. And our job as a C-suite leader, my job with my colleagues is to give them the tools and the resources and the inspiration and authority to have control over those decisions. I always say I'm chief marketing officer. I kind of think I'm also chief motivational officer, chief mental health officer. I mean, all these things are, in my mind, as a leader, part of the role. In particular, when working with customers or any other business related activity, we've got to give them the ability to make those decisions and empower them to do so. So this is kind of still, I don't know about all of you, still a massive hot topic, remote versus hybrid, which way do we go? So I'll give you kind of a fun, quick story. So one, we have remote employees. We are now, I think, in 17 different states as well, where we have talent spread out and love our remote employees. And we also, if you are in headquarters near Rochester, we have the hybrid approach. And up until literally about a week ago, it was Monday, Friday, work from home, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, preferred in office. And we always do air quotes, preferred. And the reason we do air quotes, I think, is to hedge a little bit, to basically say, listen, life is complicated. And even though that's kind of the hybrid schedule, flexibility is really what our people want. So even though Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are preferred in office, if on a Wednesday, it's just easier to stay home for whatever reason, stay home. It's the flexibility piece that I think are really key. And having the communication with your managers and what is it that they're doing? Does it make sense? And explaining the why. The thing is, I think we talk about change management as like these big things. I think there's a lot of micro change managements. I think micro change management to me is explaining the why in almost everything we do to, hey, this is why we're hybrid, and really giving a good explanation. 9 times out of 10, when you explain the why, you're really bringing people along. If you just sort of say the thing and mandate the thing without the why, you're just going to create friction and angst. And even if the why doesn't make sense to everybody, then you open up that dialogue and explain, hey, this is where we're at. Like, again, we don't have all the answers. This is where we're at. So we have a bunch of opportunities to give feedback, write in questions, whether it's anonymous or you can identify yourself. And just recently we had one where someone said, hey, and we did a shift because we had our board come in on a Monday. And we said, hey, we'd love the board, because just schedules and flying in. We'd love for you all to meet the board, and they're going to do a panel discussion, and you can ask the board, any questions. They're here for you. And so ultimately what wound up happening is when we shifted to Monday, we said, listen, come on in on Monday. But of course, that means, whatever day work from home, you can shift that to a Wednesday or Thursday. So one of the questions somebody popped up was like, I really enjoyed coming in on a Monday. I didn't quite realize it. I really loved coming in on a Monday. Do you think we could shift work from home and hybrid and everything? Does it have to be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? Could it be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday? Could it be Monday, Wednesday, Friday? And we said, sure. Yes, let's shift it. So basically it's, hey, ideally, we'd love you in the office 3 days out of the week. Wednesday, we decided is our anchor day so that like everybody is in on Wednesday as much as possible. Obviously, depending on like what I said, if there's some flexibility or challenges there, but ideally Wednesday's that anchor day. That just changed literally a week ago. And it came from someone that just said, hey, could we do this? So there's again, it's just listening and kind of hearing from people. So that's where we're at. We're finding some interesting things, which I'll touch on a little bit in particular. But I do want to shift because I think this is really, really important. This is a topic that is incredibly, unfortunately, and incredibly near and dear to my heart. Mental health is a business priority. It is a business priority like DEIB. And as an organization, I'm sure there's times and there's some leaders that are like, I didn't sign up for that. Like, we run a business. Well, guess what? If you run a business where human beings are involved in that business, then human beings are complex. And in that complexity, mental health is part of that complexity. And I unfortunately have lost several people to suicide. We lost a colleague to suicide. And, I think this is probably, you never know when grief sort of smacks me on the side of the face. But I remember kind of thinking about what I was going to talk to you all today. And I knew, it's something that I share my vulnerability. I usually wind up tearing up, get choked up. And it's because I can't believe that this is where we're at. I can't believe that I lost a colleague. And that particular colleague, I actually texted him Thursday night. I ran into someone that knew him, and I took a selfie with her. I sent a picture to him and I said, wanted to send you this. We have just been talking about you and we just both adore you. And that was the last text message. So that I sent him. And the following day, unfortunately, he died by suicide. So as you can see, very raw still, excuse me, and hard, really hard. And, I'm also then honored as someone within my organization to bring this to light and have these conversations and share these stories and say, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to learn? So there's less of these stories. And that's something that I didn't go to business school for, right? It wasn't on the curriculum of how to navigate that and deal with that. So, when it comes to mental health, being a business priority, you know what it means? It means talk about it, bring it up. If you're not equipped, bring people in that are, leverage EAP, leverage any tool you have, constantly check in, do all the things because it's just so incredibly important. Okay, so we talk about DEIB, internal bias towards race, gender, ethnicity, but what about our own internal bias around work? Just really asking the simple question, hey, where are you going? So I do it all the time and I'd stopped doing it. But early on, I was like, where are you going? It only because I'm excited. Like, where are you going? Are you going someplace fun? What I realized, though, is if I'm asking that, right, though I like to think, we aren't really hierarchical as some companies, the reality is your C-suite leader just asked, where are you going? And that can mean something very different to them. I'm now very deeply aware of it, that I found that many of my folks would say, well, I'm just going to go home because I got to let the dog out, but I'm going to get right back online. And I thought, oh my gosh, you think I'm like asking you because I'm worried about your job or what you're doing or your performance. So I realized sometimes we don't realize our title. We don't realize the history that comes with titles and hierarchy. So you just have to be really acutely aware of just simply asking things like, where are you going to a passing employee has employees cringing. Like I said, I've been in business for 20 years. I remember where are you going actually meant, no, really, where are you going? I want to know everything that you're going. When are you getting back online? And that's not the case today. I genuinely, and I think our people get excited, like, oh, where are you going? But because people bring in history and bias and baggage, you don't know what that simple statement can trigger for them. So you have to be really, really, really aware of it. We all have bias. It is innate. And I even hate the word unconscious bias. And I hate it because it implies that you aren't aware and you can't really do anything about it. So it's untrue, right? Learn, read, unlearn, relearn, all the things, learn people's stories, hear their stories, realize that you may have to build trust to earn the right to hear those stories. Not everybody is going to be able to just kind of share a story because maybe you haven't built trust or they have trauma in their lives where trust is a factor. So you really have to think about that. Bottom line, we just need behavior change. It's really that. And usually with behavior change, it's practice, continue to ask people around you how you can do it better. I think the other one is as companies are thinking about equity between employees, in particular, when some are in the building and some are remote, are they really being treated the same? This is something that's interesting. And especially if they aren't physically seen, will this impact their pathing? Hopefully not, but probably yes. And I say that because things have shifted pretty fast. So these kind of, new constructs that are happening right now are really trying to change against decades-long business constructs of what was the right way of doing things and the wrong way. So it needs to be flipped on its head, and that at times can take change and time. Let's talk about, though, what I'm recognizing, which is proximity bias. So the human brain has an innate quirk. We all have this innate quirk, which leads us to favor people and ideas which are familiar over those which are unfamiliar. So if you think about that, this is called proximity bias, and it can lead to remote workers or anyone not working standard headquarter hours being included less, recognized less. It is something that we need to be acutely aware of. I can't tell you how many times in my career, just being physically seen or raising my hand because I heard something, in the halls. So now you've got this remote workforce. How are you as leaders? And that's on us. How does leaders think about proximity bias and make sure that it does not impact pathing? It does not impact their ability to continue to grow and be involved in the company. And then how do we teach managers? The training and the learning has shifted dramatically to include these types of things, not just your skill set of day to day. How do you run a great performance appraisal? It's this stuff. It's getting into some pretty heavy stuff to help managers be equipped to have these conversations. Okay, so what are we losing if we change the way that we are working? I think we need to actually ask ourselves the opposite of that, which is what are we winning? What are we gaining if we change the way that we are working? Just listen to your people. Ask the right questions. The more you lean into them, I think truly the more they will lean into you. Trust them, treat them like adults. I know this feels like common sense, but in 20 years in business, in my experience, common sense is just not so common. We hear these things, values are thrown up on a wall, but living them, living your values, living your ethos, being open to constant feedback on how to improve, that to me is kind of the game-changing sense of all of it. So I'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing to see if it inspires any of you, but we put DEIB in our strategy map. So it is literally not just kind of a side of the desk initiative. It is in our strategy to be woven in through every facet of our company. We are still far away from being leading in that particular space. We've won awards, and I do this because, I love, here's why I actually love awards when you're kind of starting new things. And for us, when we really started to say, wow, DEIB has to be kind of part of our strategy, the reason I wanted to go for awards is because they were asking questions in those awards that I was like, we don't do that. We don't do that. We don't do that. And it was a great working document to basically say, well, wow, what if we actually start doing this stuff? So it's one of the reasons why I actually love going for certain awards, not necessarily the good job you won an award, but because the questions and the level that you have to do to win that award is something that usually you can look at your own company and go, wow, there's a major gap that we have there. We are massively transparent. We do monthly, here's all the financials. Here are all the updates. Here's what's going on with our people. Just massively transparent. I have been at Butler Till for 12 years. I forget sometimes that that's not everybody's normal. When I go and I look at other companies and I do things like this and I jump into other organizations, I realize like, oh, that's not baseline. So I forget that our transparency, which is just so second nature to us, is a real struggle for a lot of organizations. I mean, not only are we massively transparent in the financials, we also don't assume everybody knows how to read a balance sheet. So we do tons of financial 101s. You know, it's almost like little mini MBA classes. Anything you want to know, here's our annual report. If you have to understand what an income statement looks like, you know, you want to understand this expense, we set up plenty of mechanisms for them to learn, which I'm really, really proud of. Multiple ways to communicate with us. Feedback loops, anonymous, you know, you can raise your hand, all sorts of different ways. We have open door policies, you know, as much as I always say, hey, come on, schedule time. We also have to make sure we're kind of getting out and talking to people. We do a lot of kind of coffee hours, new hire regroups. So the whole leadership team just meets and greets new hires remote and on site. I love that. We do engagement surveys. We are constantly asking our people for feedback. We do a yearly engagement survey, and then throughout the year, we do pulse surveys. So we don't want to assume, right? You don't want to wait a whole year to just drop an engagement survey and to be massively surprised if something's off. So throughout the year, we do surveys, pulse surveys that we call, to just check in and make sure we're on the right track. And there's plenty of times where we've gotten a survey back and realized something's amiss here. We've got to pivot. And then we explain what we're doing. And we actually saved the whole agency. We got the survey back. It looks like we're kind of falling down here. Here are some things that we're going to do to ensure that we do better. And we are massively transparent about it, which I'm, again, really honored about. And then we're dedicated to learning. You know, all of this is just a lot of learning, a lot of relearning, a lot of unlearning. So one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is to make sure that at every turn, we just continue to learn and grow. So one of my most recent favorites is we created an ideas app that allows us to capture any idea. And guess what? So, like, I think you can see in here, are we ever going to be a 4-day work week? You know, I love that. I love that people are asking these things. We got asked a lot about, at one point, a paternity leave. And it may not be current, like we don't do a 4-day work week. It may not be current. But guess what? There was probably a time where you could have asked a question 10 years ago, and that is now our normal here. So we don't do 4 days, but I know there's companies that are already starting to do it. I know it's discussed and being discussed. We don't judge it. And we're like, oh, and we answer like, hey, we're in professional services right now. We service clients. If our clients are not on a 4-day schedule, it's going to be really difficult for us to be on a 4-day schedule. Again, the why, like explain the why. Trust your people, trust their ideas. They will most likely surprise you in all the best ways. And frankly, you will learn to be a better leader because of it. And then number 2, we think about the employee as a whole. So these are just kind of the 2 shifts. I love the ideas app to give them space to share their thoughts, anything from business to just how we run day to day. But I love looking at the person as a whole. So not only do we consider their financial health, but we consider their physical health, and now we consider their mental health. And we think about that. We think about the whole person. And, you know, some of our benefits are pretty straightforward, but then, right, you can bring your dogs to work. We have an entire dog wall that is all the pictures of all the puppies. Dogs are running around. It's fantastic. And listen, when you kind of a stressful day and this dog kind of strolls into your office, it's very difficult to be annoyed unless you really don't like dogs, which is a bit of a challenge if you're here to work at Butler Till and Digital Hive. But we do love our dogs. So that is something just kind of fun. As an employee-owned workforce, leveraging the power of culture has always been at the forefront of every discussion. And yet so many companies are struggling with the actual implementation of change. They hear these things, they want to do these things, but really being able to make that change is still a big struggle. But when truly you unleash empowered people, and in our case, owners, right? It's an employee-owned company, but when you unleash empowered people, and they don't have to be owners, but if you think of them that way, and you think of them as an important product, and what can you do to nurture and take care of that product, you will have a competitive advantage that I truly believe most can't touch. And I think that is what's really, really important. And I also like, we are making it very complicated. And I'm not saying all of this is easy. By no means this is easy. I'm really grateful that we had foundational elements in place that when a pandemic happened, when big things kind of shift and change, it's easier to embrace. It's easier to recognize, and pivoting doesn't feel so hard. So embrace flexibility, reward inclusion and belonging, continue to just double down on that, build unbelievable connections through transparency, pay attention to what owners, in our case, what your employees want. Don't be afraid to give it to them. I mean, trust me, you're in a relationship. In some degree, you are in a relationship, and sometimes in a relationship for many, many hours during the week. And so how do you navigate great relationships? Trust, transparency, communication, explaining the why, being in a partnership. And when you think that way, it's a game changer. So I hope it was helpful. I'm going to stop sharing in a minute, but thank you so much for your time today. I will tell you this here. I'll stop sharing, kind of give you my Nearlings chat. I don't like saying failure. We've had a lot of what I call Nearlings, and I stole this from a dear friend of mine, Sue Piotrowski, who's a consultant that we use at Badfish. She's fantastic. Her company is called Badfish Consulting, and she introduced me to this word Nearling. And so the notion of Nearling isn't necessarily a failure. It's like, hey, you were nearly there, but something was amiss, whether it's timing, whether it's you didn't have the right resources, you didn't have the right money, whatever the case may be, it was a Nearling. But don't beat yourself up so much that it was a failure, because failure has such a negative connotation to it. Think about it like you're going to have a series of Nearlings. You're going to have a series of trying something and attempting things, and it's not going to work, or it didn't quite work to the level that you wanted it to. But I will say, to really grow personally, professionally, and that includes as an organization as a whole, just keep moving forward. Keep moving forward and learn and ask other people for advice and thoughts, and look at other successful people, look at other successful companies and go, oh, okay, I could learn from that. Don't hold so tight onto constructs and things. Be okay with change and agility, and embrace it. And once you do, everything else sort of falls into place.
Hey, my friend, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, be sure to rate, review, and share your biggest takeaway. And if you're wanting more, you can access hundreds of recent speakers, book summaries, great articles, and more at no additional charge through your membership portal. You can also get involved in a Women Leaders Association mastermind group or a networking group near you. Or if you just need to access your membership portal, simply go to womenleaderspodcast.com to be connected. Because here at Women Leaders Association, we believe we go further, faster, and have more fun when we go together. That's all for today, my friends. Bye for now.